There comes a time in life, sooner or later, when achievements don't fill the silence anymore. You've raised your kids. You've built your career. Maybe you've even retired. And one morning, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. And you stop. Not because you're admiring what you see, but because you're searching for something. You're not looking at your reflection. You're looking through it. Trying to remember who you were. Trying to understand who you are now. That's exactly what happened to me. I was in my mid-60s. I had already lived what most people would call 3 lifetimes. Bodybuilding champion, Hollywood actor, governor of California. I had goals, and I crushed them. I had the fame, the fortune, the recognition. But that morning, none of that mattered. I looked at my own eyes in that mirror, and they looked tired. Not from age, but from something deeper. I wasn't angry at the world. I was angry at myself. And I didn't even know why at first. I was still working, still traveling, still training. But it was mechanical, empty. I was going through the motions. The fire that once lit up my mornings had turned into a dull flicker. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was surviving, on momentum, on reputation, on the image I had built over decades. But inside, I was slipping, quietly, gradually. And that's how it gets you. You don't fall all at once. You drift. And drifting is dangerous. Because when you drift long enough, you stop feeling like you. I started getting impatient with people I cared about. I snapped at a close friend over something meaningless. I skipped workouts I never used to miss. I made excuses. I told myself, I've earned the right to slow down. But deep down, I knew that was a lie. I wasn't slowing down. I was stalling. I was losing the edge that made me who I was. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly felt proud of yourself? Not for what you did in the past, but for who you are today. Because that's the question that haunted me. You see, people often ask me what the secret to success is. And I used to say, vision, hard work, no plan B. But there's something even more fundamental. Something that comes before all of that. Discipline. Not discipline as punishment, but as structure, as self-respect, as a way to live with purpose. That's what I had lost. And that morning in the mirror, I made a promise to myself. I will not let this version of me be the final version. I may be older. I may move a little slower. But I still have fire. I just needed to reignite it. And to do that, I had to rebuild, from the inside out. That was the beginning of a turning point. A quiet decision that changed everything. It didn't start with motivation. Motivation is temporary. It fades. It started with a question. Who have I become? And more importantly, who do I want to be, now? And if you're watching this, and that question feels familiar, then stay with me. Because what I discovered next, a simple 3-step formula, brought me back to life. Not just as Arnold the bodybuilder, or Arnold the actor, or Arnold the governor, but as a man. And I believe it can do the same for you. Stay hungry. We're just getting started. After that mirror moment, something started to unravel in me. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, constant way, like a thread being pulled from a sweater. One tug, and suddenly everything feels loose. People looked at my life from the outside and saw a man who had it all. Mr. Olympia 7 times. Box office champion. Governor of the 5th largest economy in the world. They saw the medals, the speeches, the magazine covers. They saw the Terminator. They saw strength. But what they didn't see, what I barely allowed myself to see, was the silence that crept in when the applause faded. You see, when your life has always been about climbing the next mountain, what happens when you reach the peak and realize there's no more summit to conquer? That's the part no one talks about. They don't prepare you for after success. They don't tell you that the trophies collect dust, that fame doesn't fill your soul, and that no amount of recognition can quiet a restless mind. I remember waking up in my big house in Brentwood. Everything was in order. The morning light came through the curtains just like it always had. But I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, not because I was tired, but because I didn't know why I should get up. What was I chasing now? In my earlier years, I always had a clear vision. I wanted to be the best bodybuilder in the world, and I did that. I wanted to become a successful actor. Done. I wanted to give back through public service. Check. Every phase of my life had been defined by intense, focused goals. I lived by the rule, stay hungry, and I did. But once those major chapters were behind me, there was no script for what came next. No competition. No campaign. Just the long quiet of routine. It sounds peaceful, but in truth, it was unsettling, because peace without purpose feels like emptiness. There's something dangerous that happens when your calendar is full, but your heart feels empty. You're doing things, moving through the motions, smiling for photos, answering interviews, but inside you're fading. I'd go to the gym, but I wasn't pushing myself. I'd attend meetings, but I wasn't really in them. I was surrounded by people, yet more alone than I'd ever felt. And here's the hardest part to admit. I was ashamed of it. Ashamed to feel unfulfilled after everything I had achieved. Ashamed to be lost, when the world saw me as a leader. But let me tell you something, and I say this to every man and woman watching who's past 60 and feeling what I felt. You are not weak for feeling lost. You are human. You don't need to pretend to be okay just because you've lived a long life. You're allowed to ask yourself hard questions, even now. What is my purpose today? What do I want my next chapter to look like? Am I living with passion, or just existing with habit? I started to realize that everything I had built, every win, every title, was just the frame. But the fuel, the thing that drove me to wake up early and train harder and push further, was always purpose. And purpose isn't something you achieve once. It's something you practice daily. Just like a muscle, if you stop training it, it withers. That was the crack forming beneath the surface. Not a lack of success, but a lack of connection to something greater than tasks and to-do lists. That's when I knew success alone wasn't enough. I didn't want to just look strong. I wanted to feel strong again. Not for the cameras, not for the fans, but for myself, for my own peace. And that's when I began searching, not for a new trophy, not for another title, but for a way to discipline my inner world the same way I had disciplined my body, to rebuild the structure inside me that success had once masked. That search, that quiet hunger, would lead me to something simple, powerful, and life-changing. A formula. And in the next chapter, I'll show you how it started, with one breaking point, and one decision that changed everything. I wish I could tell you that the realization came to me peacefully, that I had some deep, Zen-like moment of insight that changed my life. But it didn't happen that way. It happened in the middle of an ordinary day, over something so small, so insignificant, that I don't even remember what the argument was about. But I do remember how I felt. Tight in my chest. Irritated. Impatient. Like I was walking around with a pressure cooker inside me, and someone had just tapped the lid. And I exploded. It wasn't a dramatic scene, no shouting match, no public meltdown. But I raised my voice. I said something sharp, careless. I saw the look on the other person's face shift from confusion to hurt. And just like that, the moment passed. But the silence afterward said everything. I had hurt someone I loved, someone who didn't deserve it. Not because they did anything wrong, but because I was lost inside myself. I stood there afterward, frozen, and I realized this wasn't about them. This was about me. I was carrying around so much frustration, so much unspoken tension, and it had finally boiled over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. I felt ashamed. Not because I lost my temper. I'm human. But because I finally saw what I had been refusing to face. I was no longer in control of myself. I walked downstairs, into my home gym. It was just after midnight. No lights except for the faint glow coming from the hallway. The iron plates were sitting silently on the racks. The same weights I had lifted for decades. The same space where I had sculpted my body, built my career, and built my identity. But that night, I didn't lift a single thing. I sat down on the bench and lowered my head. And I whispered to myself, where did the discipline go? It hit me like a weight crashing to the floor. I had spent a lifetime training my body, mastering routines, pushing through pain, staying focused on my goals. I had trained for war on the stage, on the screen, in politics. But somewhere along the way, I stopped training my mind. I stopped challenging myself in the ways that mattered most. I had let myself drift, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And that moment, sitting alone in the silence of my gym, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Truth. Brutal, raw, necessary truth. I wasn't the man I used to be, not because of age, but because I had let go of the very thing that made me who I was. Structure, discipline, purpose. That night wasn't the lowest point of my life, but it was one of the most important, because it forced me to stop lying to myself. It forced me to admit that I needed to rebuild, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. And that's when I made the decision, not to find some big new goal, not to win another title, but to take control, again, to return to the fundamentals, to rebuild my foundation, to create something simple, something clear, something that I could do every day, no matter my age, no matter my circumstances. That's when I began writing down what would become the 3-step discipline formula. Not a motivational speech, not a fitness program, but a blueprint for realignment, for returning to the man I wanted to be. And in the next chapter, I'll show you exactly how it started, with one small step that changed everything. Because sometimes, when you're falling apart, all it takes is one small act of control to start putting yourself back together. And that's what I did, one step at a time. Before we continue, I want to take a brief pause. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching or listening from? And have you ever experienced something similar in your own life? A moment when you realized something had to change? If this story speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe. There's more to come, and I'd be honored to have you on this journey. Now, let's continue. I sat there on the gym bench long after the house had gone dark and quiet. No music, no distractions, just me, the silence, and the weight of my own thoughts. And in that stillness, I didn't ask for motivation. I didn't wait for inspiration. I knew better. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline, that's what lasts. But I also knew this. I had lost my rhythm, my structure, the daily systems that once kept me sharp, focused, grounded. So I did what I had always done when I hit a wall. I went back to the basics. Not the weights, not the cameras, the mental fundamentals, the habits, the rituals. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need a new life overhaul. I didn't need some perfect plan or grand resolution. I needed to take back control, in small, deliberate ways. That's where the 3-step discipline formula was born. Not out of theory, out of necessity. Step 1. The anchor. Start with one thing. Do it with intention. Every single day. I needed something that would ground me, something that told my brain, you're in charge again. So I picked the smallest, simplest thing, making my bed. Yes, that's how it started. But here's the truth. It wasn't about the bed. It was about precision, about doing something with care, consistency, and pride. I pulled the covers tight, aligned the pillows, smoothed every wrinkle. I treated it like it mattered, because it did. That small act told me, you're not drifting anymore, you're choosing. You see, an anchor is anything that reminds you who you are. For some, it might be stretching. For others, journaling. It doesn't have to be flashy, but it has to be yours. When you start your day with control, the rest of the day follows that tone. Step 2. The challenge. Do something uncomfortable every day, on purpose. This was the heart of the formula. Because discipline doesn't grow in comfort, it grows in resistance. And I knew I had become too comfortable, so I started choosing one difficult thing each day. Sometimes it was a cold shower. Other times, a brutal hike or a phone call I had been putting off for weeks. But it wasn't about the task. It was about training my mind to lean into discomfort. Because when you choose difficulty, you stop fearing it. And the more I did this, the more my confidence returned. Not ego. Real confidence. The kind that comes from doing what you don't want to do, because you said you would. This step reminded me of the version of myself that once trained in freezing Austrian winters with no excuses. The young kid who believed that growth only comes from struggle. And he was right. Step 3. The reflection. If you don't look back, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you repeat. At the end of each day, I sat down, just 5 minutes, and asked myself 3 questions. 1. What did I do well today? 2. What did I avoid or mess up? 3. What will I do better tomorrow? Simple, but powerful. That process built awareness. And awareness is where power lives. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about seeing clearly. I didn't want to sleepwalk through life anymore. I wanted to live with eyes open. Over time, this step became my compass. If I was slipping, I'd catch it faster. If I was growing, I'd acknowledge it. Because when you stop reflecting, you stop progressing. It's that simple. So that was it. The anchor. The challenge. The reflection. 3 small actions. Every day. That's how I started rebuilding from the inside out. Not by going back to who I was, but by becoming who I needed to be now. And let me tell you something. It worked. Slowly, but powerfully. I didn't just feel stronger. I felt clear. Centered. The fog lifted. The anger faded. The momentum returned. Not because the world changed, but because I changed how I showed up in it. So if you're listening to this and thinking, where do I even begin? You begin here. With one anchor. One challenge. One reflection. You don't need more motivation. You need daily commitment. In the next chapter, I'll show you what happened when I stayed consistent, and how these 3 steps turned exhaustion into momentum and frustration into fuel. Because discipline isn't about perfection. It's about repetition. And repetition builds greatness. At any age. When I started practicing the formula, the anchor, the challenge, the reflection, I didn't expect fireworks. I wasn't looking for some overnight miracle. I knew better than that. I'd spent my whole life understanding that transformation never happens in one leap. It happens in quiet, steady steps. But still, something powerful began to shift. At first, it was subtle. I noticed I was sleeping better, not because I was physically exhausted, but because my mind was quieter. My thoughts weren't spinning all night. That alone felt like a victory. I woke up and made the bed, not like a robot, but with intention, with care. That single act became my silent declaration. I'm back in control. That was my anchor. Then came the challenges. I started small. A cold shower. A hard call. A walk uphill when I didn't feel like moving at all. And I'll be honest with you, some days I didn't want to do it. Some days I wanted to skip. But I reminded myself, discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when the mood is gone. Every time I followed through on that commitment, it was like throwing one more log on a dying fire. And slowly, the flame started to burn again. There was one morning, about 2 weeks in, when I walked past the mirror. You know, the same mirror where this all began, and I paused. Not because I was checking my appearance, but because something felt different. I saw a man with purpose in his posture again. Not a man chasing fame or approval. Not a man stuck in the past. But a man who had reclaimed his power by choosing to act, day after day, no matter how small the steps. The reflection was starting to match the man I remembered, and more importantly, the man I wanted to be. And it wasn't just in the mirror. My energy returned, not the kind you get from caffeine or adrenaline, but the deep kind, the kind that comes from living in alignment. Conversations became richer. My workouts had spark again. I was more present with the people I cared about. Because when you feel proud of yourself, you stop carrying shame. You stop snapping at others. You stop escaping. You show up. I'll never forget one morning when a friend said to me, "Arnold, you seem sharper lately. Lighter." And it made me smile, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I knew they were seeing the result of discipline. Not muscles. Mindset. And here's the most important thing I want to tell you. It's never too late to rebuild the inner machine. I don't care if you're 45, 65, or 85. If you've been drifting, if you've been tired, angry, disconnected from yourself, it's not the end. It's a signal. A sign that something inside you is calling for change. And you don't need to tear everything down to start again. You just need to build one brick at a time. That's what I did. And every day I kept showing up. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it consistently. And that consistency became my momentum. The anger faded. The bitterness melted. The fog cleared. The fire was back. Not the wild, youthful fire that burns out quickly, but a steady flame that keeps you warm through the winters of life. In the next chapter, I'll share the greatest lesson this journey taught me, something I wish I had fully understood decades ago, that discipline isn't restriction, it's freedom. And when you live with discipline, you walk into every room with strength in your spine and peace in your heart. Stay with me. We're almost there. Looking back now, I see it clearly. All those mornings I woke up tired and uncertain. All those moments when I felt like a stranger to myself. They weren't signs of weakness. They were signals, warnings, invitations. Life was asking me a question. Are you going to let this be the end, or the beginning of something new? And I chose to begin again. Not with fanfare, not with a grand announcement, but with one small action, and then another. That's the power of choice. It doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real. When people ask me now what changed my life after 60, what gave me my energy back, my peace, my power, I tell them this. It wasn't a supplement. It wasn't a new opportunity. It wasn't even motivation. It was discipline. But not the kind people misunderstand. Not the rigid, joyless version. Not punishment. Discipline is freedom. It's the freedom to wake up with clarity. The freedom to look in the mirror and feel proud of who's looking back. The freedom to trust yourself again. It gives you structure when the world feels chaotic. It gives you strength when your body feels tired. It gives you peace when everything else is noisy. And the beautiful truth is, it's available to anyone, at any age, in any season. No matter how far you've drifted. You don't need to start with a marathon. You don't need to reinvent your life overnight. You just need to start small. With one anchor, one challenge, one reflection. Make your bed. Call someone you've avoided. Ask yourself the hard questions. And then repeat. That's it. Day by day, that discipline becomes a foundation. A rhythm. A mindset. A new life. So if you're listening to me right now, and you feel like your best years are behind you, I'm here to tell you, they don't have to be. There's still fight left in you. There's still greatness in you. There's still purpose. You just have to choose it. I chose it. At a moment when I could have settled, when I could have coasted, I chose to rise. And so can you. Not for the world. Not for the applause. For yourself. Because the real victory is becoming the kind of person you're proud of, when no one's watching. So here's my final message to you. Stay consistent. Stay sharp. Stay hungry. And remember, no plan B. This is your life. Reclaim it. One step at a time. I'd love to hear what you think about this story. Have you ever faced something similar in your own life? Your comments are incredibly important. They inspire not just me, but everyone who reads them. And I want you to know that I truly believe in every single one of you. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like so you won't miss the next motivating story. To let me know you've listened until the very end, write this in the comments. Discipline is my freedom. Have a great day, and keep moving forward.